18 years ago, my husband Antoine Parker and his lover Amberly Owens died in a car accident, leaving me to raise their twin boys. I ignored everyone's judgment and raised them alone. Time flew by, and now they'd been accepted into Ivy League colleges. As I prepared dinner, I heard their excited voices. "Mom, we got in." They hugged me tightly. I looked up at them, now taller than me, and smiled. "You both are amazing. I'm so proud of you." With their birthday just 2 days away, I planned a big celebration, combining it with their graduation party. I booked a ballroom at a top hotel and shared the news with our family group chat. The replies came quickly, full of praise. On the day of the party, I arrived early to make sure everything was perfect. Most guests were from the Parker family. My own parents didn't come. They had never forgiven me for raising Antoine's children. They wanted me to move on, but I had made my choice. When Antoine's parents, Richard and Sophia, arrived, they sat at the main table with their other children. There was no seat left for me. I moved between the tables, serving food and drinks. Micah and Maxwell couldn't bear it. They pulled me into the empty seat between them. "Mom, our birthday is your day of suffering. Sit down and rest." The mood shifted. Lydia, Antoine's sister, said with a smirk, "My brother would be thrilled to see how well you raised his sons." Sophia smiled and leaned toward me. "Hannah, since the boys are going to college, that apartment of yours will be empty. Richard and I will move in. I'll cook for you." I understood then. They were eyeing my house. My parents helped pay the mortgage, and it was in my name. Antoine had died 6 months after we married, and the house was never transferred. I replied, "I've sold the apartment. I'm downsizing to a 1-bedroom and using the rest for the boys' education." Richard's face darkened. "Why didn't you discuss this with us?" I said calmly, "I'm doing this for Antoine's children." Richard demanded the money from the sale, suggesting Sophia save it for me. I smiled and replied, "I've set up a fund. Micah and Maxwell will receive monthly support until they turn 25. The hotel manager handed me the microphone and invited me to say a few words. "Thank you all for coming to celebrate Micah and Maxwell's birthday and graduation. It's a special day. It would be a pity if their biological parents weren't here to see this moment." Just then, a commotion broke out. A man and a woman entered, arm in arm. I froze. It was Antoine and Amberly, supposedly dead for 18 years. The room buzzed with murmurs. Richard and Sophia calmly invited Amberly to sit beside them. Antoine approached me and said, "Hannah, you weren't a great wife, but you were a good mother." The boys looked stunned. "What's going on?" Antoine pointed to Amberly. "She is your biological mother. Hannah couldn't have children. She refused to divorce me and threatened suicide. That's why our family was torn apart." The Parkers turned to my sons. "It was Hannah's fault you didn't grow up with your birth parents," someone added. Amberly cried and showed them her phone. "I'm your real mother. I sent you gifts every year. I even watched you from afar." Antoine wrapped his arm around her and looked at me. "We're divorcing. I'm marrying Amberly." I faced the room full of judging eyes and simply said, "Okay. I'll file for divorce tomorrow and reunite your family." Shock filled the room. Even Antoine looked puzzled. "Are you serious?" "What? Not happy about it?" I replied. Afraid I'd change my mind, Antoine pulled out a divorce agreement. "Sign it. From now on, you have no connection to Micah and Maxwell." I signed. The boys stared at me, hurt. "Mom, you don't want us anymore?" Amberly, smiling proudly, tucked the papers away. "Thank you, Hannah, for making us whole. If it weren't for you, we wouldn't have lived so freely all these years." Richard waved me off. "There's nothing left for you here." I stood and said, "Now that the agreement is signed, it's time to tell you the truth." Amberly frowned. "What do you mean?" I took a breath, clapped my hands, and called toward the door. "Come in." Moments later, 2 figures stepped into the hall. "Who are they?" Amberly asked, staring at the 2 ragged boys who had just entered. Panic surged within her. One boy sat in a wheelchair with shriveled legs, while the other had a vacant expression, punctuated by occasional, deranged laughter and drool at the corner of his mouth. I smirked. They're your and Antoine's sons." Antoine flushed with anger. "Are you insane? You found 2 beggars to repulse me." Ignoring him, I gestured to the boys and asked, "Don't you think they resemble Amberly?" Children often resembled their mothers when they grew up. Despite their dirt-covered faces, the boys bore a slight resemblance to Amberly. Amberly was completely panicked, but she still held on. She asked, "Hannah, what do you mean?" I settled into a chair, crossing my legs. "Micah and Maxwell are my biological children. These are the sons you've been waiting for 18 years. Amberly froze. "No way. You're lying. I want a paternity test." Most people had a general idea when comparing their looks. I retrieved a folder from my bag. "Here are the paternity reports for Griffin, Gavin, and Antoine. Read them." I tossed the file onto the table. Amberly knelt to skim through the pages. When she reached the final identification results, her legs buckled. She stammered, "No, it can't be. You must have faked it. You're crazy about wanting a son. You even forged the paternity tests." I pointed to my head and said, "The document is notarized with a licensed notary public signature." The Parker family members were stunned when they saw the signature. Only Micah and Maxwell sighed in relief, standing quietly behind me. When Antoine and Amberly died in that strange car accident, their quick cremation raised my suspicions about their deaths. Afterward, I discovered I was pregnant with twins, so I came up with a bold plan. I took the initiative to assume the responsibility of raising the children. I took them to the countryside under the guise of grief. 2 years later, I returned with my twin boys. Everyone assumed they were Antoine's illegitimate children, even my parents, who called me foolish for raising someone else's kids. But I didn't care about their opinions. Everything I did was for this moment. Antoine gazed at the 2 little beggars with a mixed expression. I smiled and said, "Griffin, Gavin, they're your mom and dad. Come with them." The silly Gavin grinned and hugged Amberly tightly, exclaiming, "Mom! Mom!" His snot, tears, and spit splattered Amberly. She screamed in horror and pushed him away with all her strength. "Get away! You're disgusting." Gavin stumbled and Griffin steadied him, glaring at Amberly gloomily. I taunted, "What? Your sons didn't get into Ivy League colleges, and you're disowning them?" Faced with my sarcasm, Amberly gritted her teeth and suppressed her anger. She said, "If they are my son, I will definitely admit them." At today's birthday party, with dozens of the Parker family members present, Antoine and Amberly had to feign love for their children. She stared at me fiercely. "Why did my 2 sons become like this? Did you abuse them?" I shrugged. "Who knows if it's your defect or Antoine's? That's what caused both kids to have congenital diseases. I had to support myself, and since you abandoned the kids, I have no choice but to send them to an orphanage." Amberly pointed at me, her face flushed with rage, but she couldn't find the words. Antoine and Amberly were humiliated. They had no choice but to take the children away. After they left, the birthday party ended in discord. Richard and Sophia wept, unable to believe their 2 grandchildren, who were admitted to the Ivy League colleges, weren't Antoine and Amberly's children. A week before the birthday party, I visited Antoine's parents and overheard them discussing how to use the occasion to reunite with Hannah and their sons. Connecting the dots, I understood their intentions. So I brought Griffin and Gavin. They were eager for a family reunion, and I wanted to fulfill that. After all these years, I aimed to revenge on them for what I had suffered in the Parker family. After selling my house, I bought a new one. I deliberately chose a new home opposite Amberly's. Conversations with neighbors revealed that Amberly and Antoine had lived there for 18 years. They were also a well-known model couple in the community. But the once loving couple now acted like enemies. The apartment had poor soundproofing, and I overheard their daily arguments. "Antoine, if it weren't for your stupid idea, we wouldn't be in this situation. You gave birth to 2 disabled kids. How can we live like this?" The sound of belt whips signaled that Gavin had been beaten again. He had a mental disability and often made mistakes. Since moving here, I heard them beating and scolding him every day. That day, I encountered Griffin in the apartment. He pushed his wheelchair to buy groceries. His face was covered with bruises, and he looked extremely pitiful. The apartment exit was a long slope, and he had difficulty turning the outer circle of the wheelchair. He didn't have enough strength and always slid down. I stepped in, grabbed the wheelchair handle, and pushed him up with all my strength. Griffin turned to me and whispered, "Thank you." "Do you need me to call the police?" I asked. "It's pointless. They'll beat us more violently," he replied, his eyes narrowing with hatred. "That's right. Sometimes the internet works better than the police," I said casually. Griffin paused, and when he looked up again, his eyes became clear again. He was smart and could understand some things quickly. I was close to Antoine's distant cousin, Olivia. One day, she invited me to dinner. She said in a low voice, "Hannah, let me tell you something. Antoine borrowed money from his parents, claiming he has 2 more people to feed." I took a bite of my food and waited for her to gossip. She continued, "And guess what? His parents scolded him, saying Amberly's health issues led to giving birth to 2 disabled sons, and they planned to introduce him to someone new." I asked curiously, "Isn't Antoine married to Amberly?" Olivia replied, "Antoine wants a divorce. He doesn't want to raise those 2 disabled sons." "His parents introduced him to whom?" I asked. Olivia leaned in. "It's his parents' relative's daughter, Diana Ellis, who works in housekeeping. She's going to be a nanny at Antoine's house, but actually, she's there to give birth to a baby. Antoine's parents would permit him to divorce Amberly once Diana has a son." Olivia burst into laughter after saying this. What a weird family. I chuckled too, knowing Antoine would probably never have peace again. I just didn't expect Diana to come so quickly. Only 3 days later, I saw a beautiful woman moving into Amberly's house. Amberly was unhappy, but once she learned that Sophia was footing the bill, she had nothing to say. Once Diana arrived, Antoine's attitude toward Amberly shifted dramatically. "You stay at home every day and have nothing to do. Go out and work," he sneered. "What? I was your mistress and bore you 2 sons, and now you're turning on me?" Amberly shrieked. Her sharp voice echoed throughout the department. "Don't mention your sons. You're sick and so are they." Antoine roared. "You bastard. You're such an asshole." Amberly screamed back. Moments later, the sounds of pots and pans clattering echoed from the apartment, creating a chaotic symphony. Under pressure to make ends meet, Amberly went to find a job. But she had never worked for more than 20 years, and no company wanted her. In the end, she could only work as a dishwasher in a restaurant. Struggling to cope, she vented her frustrations on Griffin and Gavin. Every day after she got off work, the neighbors could hear Gavin's screams and Griffin's pleas for mercy. Some people couldn't stand it and blamed her in the group chat. "Room 402, can you stop hitting your children every day? Are you their mom or not? Yeah, your actions upset the whole apartment and made my son cry." I've seen her kids. One is in a wheelchair, and the other is mentally retarded. Maybe she caused them to these situations. We lived in the same apartment for so many years. How come she suddenly has two sons this big? The group chat buzzed with heated discussions and rumors. I was watching the group chat with great interest. Finally, Amberly snapped back. It's none of your business if I discipline my son. Go to hell shit, all of you. The once gentle Amberly had transformed into a shrew. While she worked the night shift, Antoine and Diana recklessly cavorted in her home, disregarding Griffin and Gavin. I thought about it and prepared to escalate the situation. The next day, I installed a camera outside my house. When Amberly was not at home, Antoine and Diana openly flirted. The neighbors would pretend not to see it. Those who were once friendly with Amberly also cut off contact with her because of her beating children. Everyone in the building knew about Antoine's infidelity, except Amberly. I edited a collection of Antoine's trysts with Diana and shared it with the group chat, stirring up a storm of gossip. My God, this family is really messed up. It's no surprise. If I had a wife who abused the children every day, I would also cheat on her. Wicked mom, cheating dad, poor kids. I also sent a message in the group chat. What cheating? Don't you know Amberly was supposed to be the mistress? This sparked even more chatter. I sent the video of the birthday party to the group at the right time. Fortunately, I hired a photographer to record the whole process that day. In order to avoid being recognized, I also blurred my and my son's faces. Holy shit. These two are so devious, pretending to disappear while leaving the kids to the wife to raise. They're trying to claim someone else's achievements. If the wife weren't pregnant, they would have bullied her to death. It's satisfying to see it come to an end. They expected 2 Ivy League sons but got 2 beggars instead. Surprisingly, Amberly refrained from lashing out in the group chat this time. As night fell, a commotion erupted from the opposite door. Tell her to get lost. Get out of here. You adulterous couple. Shameless. Amberly shouted, throwing Diana's luggage outside and slapping her hard. Antoine wrapped his arms around Diana and said, Amberly, what's wrong with you? Diana is pregnant. If anything happens to her, I won't let this go. Amberly was on the verge of tears, her eyes red. I risked my reputation and fought to give birth to 2 sons for you. And this is how you treat me. Her voice trembled. Antoine glared at the 2 children in the room with disdain. Hannah won't let Micah and Maxwell admit me, and you gave birth to these 2 disabled sons. Do you want our family to have no offspring? Their argument escalated until a community worker arrived to mediate. Antoine turned away with the pregnant Diana, but the shouting continued across the street. Amberly shouted, Why? Why are you my sons? Why? A chilling scream followed. Ah, that hurts. Ouch. Help. Hearing the sound, I immediately called the police. More than 10 minutes later, 5 officers arrived. One of them said, Open the door. We're the police. After a long pause, Amberly opened the door, glaring at them. I haven't broken any laws. Why are you looking for me? The officers looked into the house, and their expression changed instantly. They pushed Amberly aside and walked in. The sight shocked everyone. I looked through the surveillance camera at the door. Gavin lay on the floor, bloodied, with a deep wound on his head. Help! She's going to kill my brother. Griffin cried, covering Gavin's head with a towel, panic in his eyes. The police called an ambulance and took Gavin to the hospital. Amberly was pushed into the ambulance. Griffin had secretly bought a webcam after our last encounter, but I never expected him to carry it and stream live. While scrolling through live-streamed videos, a local recommendation caught my eye. Clicking on it, I found that it was a first-person perspective, and the person in the camera was Amberly. She stood with her hands on her hips, shouting angrily, I told you. I have no money. You can treat him or not. The doctor calmly explained, If he has surgery now, he can still recover, but delaying could be dangerous. Amberly said, What are you afraid of? Dying is the best outcome. If they weren't in uniform, the officers might have lost their temper. One said, You're the child's mother. How can you be so cruel? Amberly replied, Bah, if it weren't for these 2 idiots, I wouldn't be in this situation. They both deserve to die. Amberly hissed and wailed, finally collapsing to the ground in tears. The doctors had no choice but to request an emergency green channel. 5 hours later, Gavin emerged from surgery. The doctor shook his head regretfully. Mistaking this as a sign of her son's death, Amberly jumped up and asked, Is he dead? The doctor froze. It was the first time he had seen such a cold-blooded mother. He said, The child's life is not in danger, but due to severe brain damage, he won't be able to care for himself in the future. Amberly's expression darkened, her resentful gaze seeming to blame the doctor for saving Gavin. Surprisingly, the next day, Griffin's social media following surged to 100,000. Videos of Amberly beating them and scolding them went viral and remained on the hot search list for 3 consecutive days. There were tens of thousands of comments under each video. I took a casual look and saw that the netizens were cursing harshly. Why don't parents like this go to hell? Bastards! Doesn't the police care? This is domestic violence, even homicide. Fuck! The police don't care, but I do. Let's expose them. I know Antoine's workplace. Men like him should be castrated. I turned off my phone and leaned back on the sofa. 2 days later, I saw that netizens had found Antoine's workplace. A group of people surrounded him and beat him up, leaving him with a swollen face. His boss even announced in front of the camera that he was fired. For a middle-aged man, losing his job would make it much harder to find new work, especially now that he was an internet celebrity. Antoine decisively hid back in his hometown. But on this day, Amberly's house was unexpectedly quiet. A few days later, while wearing a mask, I encountered Amberly coming down the stairs. She wore a wide-brimmed hat and a black mask as she hurried outside. Curiosity led me to follow her to a plastic surgery clinic. Coincidentally, it was where I worked. Through the surveillance, I witnessed a scene in the consultation room. "I want plastic surgery to completely change my appearance so people won't recognize me," Amberly said. She had been recognized whenever she went out without a mask. While eating and shopping at the market, she was met with people throwing soup and eggs at her. Someone had even discovered her address, sending dead animals and fresh feces daily. These incidents nearly broke her. "Miss, you need to think carefully." The counselor began but was interrupted by my phone call. She said, "Ms. Roberts." I said, "Design it to her specifications." She nodded. "I see." After hanging up, I was curious about Amberly's next move. The counselor finished the design plan and quoted the price. $280,000? Amberly's voice shot up. "Ms. Owens, if you're only having comprehensive eye surgery, $10,000 will suffice," the counselor offered. "No, I need a new face." Amberly mumbled. The counselor fell silent. Amberly leaned on the table and asked, "Can I pay in installments? Can you provide loans?" The counselor shook her head in embarrassment. Suddenly, I had an idea. I took a vacation and hurried home, picking up a Loan Shark's business card from the street along the way. As noon approached, I noticed Amberly returning home on the surveillance camera, looking somewhat downcast. She paused at the advertisement stuck on the doorknob, initially ready to discard it. But after reading it, she hesitated and slipped the card into her pocket. Everything was going according to plan. Unsurprisingly, Amberly secured a loan from a shark. Within 2 days, she was on the operating table for double eyelids, a nose job, facial fillers, and lips augmentation. Soon after, she moved away with Griffin and Gavin. Amberly believed plastic surgery would transform her life. Unfortunately, she didn't know that the loan shark I had chosen for her had the highest interest rate and a complicated background. The debt quickly spiraled, and soon the debt collectors came to her door, only to find she had vanished. When I heard urgent knocking, I slowly opened the door and said, "Their family has moved out." The burly man in the lead asked, "Do you know where she moved to?" I replied, "I don't know, but I can give you the address of her husband's house." I gave him Antoine's parents' address. I despised Amberly and loathed Antoine even more. Days later, Antoine's parents wanted to meet me. They brought Antoine along, and the three of them, all smiling, had reserved a private room at a restaurant. "Hannah, it's been a long time. We really miss you," Sophia said. "Cut the pleasantries and get to the point," I interrupted impatiently. Antoine looked ready to explode but seemed to think better of it and sat back down sullen. Sophia quickly added, "It's all that bitch Amberly's fault. She took out loans and refused to pay them back. The debt collectors came to our house and beat Antoine up right away. They said they would beat him to death if he didn't pay back the money. We couldn't find Amberly, so we could only." She spoke through tears, glancing at my expression. "Please help Antoine this once. After all, he is Micah and Maxwell's biological father." Antoine frowned at my silence. He threatened, "Hannah, don't be insensitive. If you refuse, I'll cause a scene at the university. That wouldn't be good for anyone." I couldn't help but laugh at their disgusting faces. I sneered, "Who told you Micah and Maxwell are your sons?" The three of them froze. Antoine stammered, "What do you mean?" I said, "Oh, I forgot to mention at the birthday party that I applied to the sperm bank for the two of them through in vitro fertilization. You have no connection to them." The room fell silent for a moment before erupting. Antoine shouted, "Hannah, you actually cuckolded me, you shameless woman. You shameless." I leaned back in my chair, speaking softly. "I have known for a long time that your twin sons are sick, but I deliberately kept it from you. Don't you care most about continuing the family line? I heard your mistress, Diana, had a miscarriage recently. Antoine, you're destined to be the last of your family." Antoine clutched his chest, pale, and slid off his chair. I said, "Oops, looks like you're very sick. You'd better call an ambulance." With that, I grabbed my bag and turned to leave. Retribution struck suddenly. Olivia called to inform me that Antoine was sent to the hospital because of a stroke. The doctor said that even if he recovered in the future, he would only be partially paralyzed. After addressing Antoine's situation, my next concern was Amberly. I found out through an agent that she was renting an old apartment. When I found out the address, I sent it to the Loan Shark Company immediately. When I drove to the apartment, I saw several men dragging Amberly and her 2 children from the building. They were hitting her, causing blood to trickle from her mouth. "How dare you hide from your debts?" they shouted. Amberly knelt on the ground and hugged the man's legs, pleading, "I can pay it back. Please give me more time. Name a deadline. If you fail to pay by then, you can only pay with your body," one collector replied with a smirk. Just as Amberly was about to make an excuse, Griffin, paralyzed on the ground beside her, coldly remarked, "How can she have money? All her borrowed funds went to plastic surgery to become a live porn star in South Rovoa." Griffin's gaze was filled with hatred. When the debt collector heard this, he immediately became interested. He lifted Amberly's face and said, "You cost $280,000 for plastic surgery. You're quite pretty. If you want to go to South Rovoa, let us know. We can help you out. Come with me. We will take you abroad and make a lot of money. Amberly raised her head suddenly, looking at the grinning men in horror. She said, No. I will live stream at home. I promise I can pay back the money. Despite the crowd watching, no one intervened. Amberly struggled, fully aware of the fate that awaited her in their hands. Please let me go. I have 2 disabled sons. I can't leave, she cried. Someone in the crowd recognized her. You're the mother who abused your sons. How dare you use them as shields? Get out of our neighborhood. Amberly glared resentfully at Griffin as she was dragged away. She shouted, Griffin, you ungrateful bastard. She was stuffed into a car by several men. I left the apartment and drove home, returning to my routine. Antoine and Amberly had gradually faded out of my life. One day, while shopping with my colleague, we spotted a disheveled man by the underpass. His left hand trembled and curled as he numbly knelt. He knelt on the ground and nodded numbly. Help me, please. My colleague expressed sympathy and said, How pitiful. As she said this, she took out $10. I stopped her. Don't do that. He might be a liar. As I pulled her away, I glanced back. Antoine, fate is ironic. Your biological sons are beggars. And you're reduced to this. Are you satisfied? A month earlier, Olivia informed me that the Parker family had kicked Antoine out for being unable to care for himself and losing money due to Diana's affairs. Later, while browsing literature on the internet, I saw a small advertisement pop up. Beautiful Lotteries deal cards online. It was the dynamic advertisement of the South Rovoa electronic fraud, which has been very popular recently. The woman looked familiar. Upon closer inspection, I found out it was Amberly. She was smiling in a bikini, seemingly working as a streamer in an unknown country. As for Griffin and Gavin, no one had seen them again. During the winter vacation, I went to the train station to pick up my sons. In the distance, I saw 2 tall, sunny boys running with their suitcases, shouting in unison, Mom! Mom! At that moment, I felt pure happiness.